Hey guys, here's the name of the manga. Tamamori Reika seems like perfection given form. Blessed with beauty, intelligence, and an incredible figure, Reika is the president of the Academy's drama club. She has a younger club member named Suji Tsukida, who works hard every day to improve his acting skills. Life in the drama club is always lively and enjoyable. But Reika, who appears flawless to everyone around her, hides a secret that no one would ever suspect. Reika has an extremely overactive imagination. Because of this, Suji, who admires her and often tries to get closer to her, almost always ends up being misunderstood. As a result, it's hard to imagine a single day passing without Reika becoming flustered by her own thoughts. One day, Suji asked Reika for permission. He wanted to know if she was willing to be his acting partner. There was absolutely nothing strange about the question. It was a normal request with no hidden meaning. However, in Reika's imagination, the scene looked completely different. In her mind, she was lying on a bed, with her clothes slightly disheveled while Suji leaned over her in his school uniform and asked the question. In reality, Suji simply wanted to know whether his senior was willing to practice with him. But Reika's face turned bright red as her thoughts ran completely out of control. She convinced herself that Suji wanted her to be his partner for reasons far beyond acting practice. Reika even started believing that he had been pursuing her for a long time. Tamamori Reika is a perfect young woman. As the heiress to the Tamamori conglomerate, whose assets are worth well over 100 trillion yen, she was born into immense wealth. She also works as a model for the company. On top of that, she excels academically while serving as the president of the drama club. Her grades are always at the top of the class. To everyone around her, she seems completely flawless. Yet even someone as perfect as Reika has her own troubles. The source of those troubles is a first-year drama club member named Suji Tsukida. After practice that day, Suji cheerfully praised Reika's performance. Reika was surprised to see that he was still there because everyone else had already gone home. The truth was simple. Suji had stayed because he heard that Reika was still practicing. He also believed that acting practice worked better with a partner, so he asked whether Reika could play the role of the witch. Of course, Reika misunderstood the question completely. She immediately started thinking that Suji was deliberately targeting her. In fact, she had begun believing that a few days earlier. At that time, Reika had accidentally overheard a conversation between Suji and one of his friends. His friend guessed that Suji had joined the drama club because he was interested in Reika. Suji tried to deny it, but nobody listened to him. Neither his friend nor Reika, who was secretly listening from a distance, heard his explanation. The friend then started talking about Reika's appearance and how much attention she attracted from men. He confidently claimed that Suji was interested in her as well. Suji didn't immediately agree. Instead, he simply said that Reika had many wonderful qualities. What Suji meant was her talent and personality. Unfortunately, Reika interpreted those words very differently. She became convinced that Suji was talking about her physical attractiveness. The more she thought about it, the more certain she became that Suji was pursuing her. She remembered several occasions when they had ended up alone together because Suji had invited her to practice. She also noticed that he often seemed to be looking at her during training sessions. All of this only strengthened her misunderstanding. Still, as a member of the Tamamori family, Reika had no intention of running away from the situation. Meanwhile, Suji was completely focused on acting practice. That day, when he asked Reika to be his partner, he couldn't find the apple that was supposed to be used as a prop in their Snow White performance. The only thing he could find was a banana. Since they had no other choice, they decided to use the banana as a substitute for the apple. Suji began reading his lines. Reika, who was still lost in her thoughts, was startled when he suddenly started speaking. Naturally, Suji became concerned because she seemed distracted. He asked if something was wrong. Reika quickly replied that she was fine. Determined not to lose to her junior, she forced herself to focus and told him to continue. Unfortunately, she remained completely distracted. She couldn't understand why her heart raced every time Suji came close to her. Noticing her unusual behavior, Suji couldn't help asking about it again. Then he suggested that she eat the banana he was holding to regain some energy. Reika froze. She couldn't understand what he was trying to say. In her mind, Suji had cleverly turned the apple into a banana as part of some hidden plan. Since Suji assumed she understood the situation, he didn't explain further. That only made Reika even more nervous. Continuing the scene, Suji said that if Snow White ate it, she would gain the energy to stay active all day. At that point, Reika became completely convinced that Suji was targeting her. Her imagination immediately began running wild again. In her fantasy, Suji pulled her close and showered her with affection. The fantasy ended abruptly when Suji suddenly asked for her opinion. Since Reika hadn't been paying attention at all, she simply agreed without understanding the question. Then Suji asked her to eat the banana. At that moment, Reika gave in. After all, Suji was the one asking. Suji looked surprised by Reika's strange response. His confusion only grew when she opened her mouth and posed as if she were waiting for something. Having no idea what she was thinking, Suji simply placed the banana into her open mouth. Now Reika was confused. At the same time, Suji was equally confused by Reika's reaction. Suddenly, Reika stood up, grabbed the banana, and stormed away while shouting that this wasn't what she wanted. Suji could only watch in bewilderment. He had no idea why his senior had suddenly left in the middle of practice. Unfortunately for him, this wasn't the first time something like that had happened. Suji Tsukida began to wonder if Reika hated him. Even though Reika had gone along with his improvisation, Suji couldn't understand why she suddenly left. He wondered if his acting style was different from what Reika wanted. Because of this, Suji made up his mind. He would become the #1 actor in the drama club, and once he earned the lead role, he would confess his feelings to Reika. Meanwhile, Reika, who had run away, was overwhelmed with embarrassment. She realized that she had completely misunderstood the situation once again, and so continued the delusional love story between President Tamamori and a club member Suji Tsukida, a relationship filled with endless misunderstandings. Shizuen Academy, located in Akasaka, one of Tokyo's busiest districts, is a school that values both hard work and personal freedom. Because students are encouraged to pursue their passions, the academy has produced many successful graduates, including idols, models, celebrities, and even CEOs of major companies. This was the place where Reika and Suji met through the drama club. One day, Suji was listening to one of his friends chatting. His friend excitedly talked about seeing a former student who had become a famous gravure idol. However, he claimed that Reika was even more attractive. At first, Suji wasn't paying much attention. But the moment he heard Reika's name, he immediately reacted. He told his friend to stop talking nonsense. In response, his friend showed him a magazine featuring Reika on the cover. Although Reika mainly worked as a model, her popularity was incredible. Suji was surprised when he saw the magazine. Without thinking, he asked what fashion magazine it was from. Instead of answering, his friend suddenly asked Suji if he knew Reika's measurements. His friend assumed Suji would know since he spent so much time around her. Suji immediately denied it. Annoyed by the conversation, he decided to leave. He reminded himself that he still needed to review the script after school. As he walked away, Suji couldn't understand why his friend thought he was constantly checking Reika out. In his mind, he only admired her as a person and an actress. That afternoon, Suji once again stayed behind to watch Reika practice. Reika quickly noticed that he was staring at her very seriously. While practicing alone, she convinced herself that Suji was secretly watching her and waiting for an opportunity to make a move. Feeling embarrassed, she pointed out that he had stopped cleaning. Suji was startled and quickly apologized. Rather than returning to cleaning, he started talking with her. He was curious about the Little Red Riding Hood costume she would be wearing. Reika replied that everyone would get to see it the next day. She even encouraged Suji to come and watch as much as he liked. Suji enthusiastically agreed. For Reika, however, this became another challenge. She wanted to prove that she could remain composed no matter what happened. Suddenly, during practice, Reika began to feel strange. Her breathing became heavier, and she felt dizzy. At first, she thought it was because she was nervous. Then she stumbled and nearly fell. Suji immediately rushed over to check on her. Only then did Reika realize that she was genuinely feeling unwell. Suji quickly concluded that she might be sick. Without hesitation, he offered his shoulder and helped her stand. Unfortunately, Reika misunderstood his intentions once again. She became suspicious and wondered if he had some hidden motive. Ignoring her concerns, Suji focused entirely on helping her and guided her toward the infirmary. Reika decided to wait and see what he was planning. Soon they arrived at the infirmary. The room was empty. Since nobody was there to assist them, Suji suggested that Reika lie down and rest on one of the beds. Reika followed his advice. Suji carefully helped her get settled and made sure she was comfortable. Seeing how concerned he seemed, Reika started to wonder if she had been wrong about him all along. That realization only made her feel even more uneasy. Meanwhile, Suji noticed her troubled expression and assumed she was feeling worse. Reika tried to explain that she was only slightly short of breath. After hearing that, Suji finally seemed to understand what the problem was. However, he didn't explain immediately. Instead, he calmly helped adjust and loosen some of the outer clothing that might have been making her uncomfortable. Reika became startled and misunderstood the situation again. Her imagination immediately ran wild, convincing her that all of her previous suspicions had been correct. The more she overthought things, the more nervous she became. Meanwhile, Suji remained completely focused on helping her feel better. Reika became so overwhelmed by her own thoughts that she stopped resisting and simply let him continue. Suji moved closer to help free a sleeve that had become caught around her wrist. Before doing so, he politely apologized for the inconvenience. Reika turned her face away and closed her eyes in embarrassment. A moment later, she felt her wrist being released. The sleeve that had been stuck was finally free. Once he finished helping her, Suji stepped back and reassured her that everything was fine. Confused, Reika looked over at him. To her surprise, Suji had deliberately kept his eyes closed while helping her. Reika was left completely speechless, and even more confused than before. Suji then explained that Reika seemed to be having trouble breathing because her costume was too tight. That was why he had tried to loosen part of her outfit to help her feel more comfortable. Afterward, Suji asked how she was feeling. Reika wasn't sure what answer he was expecting, but her chest still felt tight. Thinking it might help, Reika asked Suji to assist her with adjusting another part of the costume that she couldn't reach herself. Suji was surprised and asked why. Reika explained that she was still uncomfortable and couldn't manage it on her own. Since she sincerely asked for help, Suji agreed. As he tried to help, he became nervous. It was the first time he had ever been in such a situation, and his first attempt failed. Meanwhile, Reika was very sensitive to being touched unexpectedly, so she reacted immediately whenever Suji accidentally brushed against her. Suji quickly apologized, worried that he had made her uncomfortable. Reika assured him that she was fine and simply asked him to be more careful. Embarrassed, Suji slapped his own cheeks to help himself focus, which startled Reika. When she asked what was wrong, Suji refused to explain and simply said he would try again. He encouraged himself to stop being embarrassed and focus on helping his senior. Finally, on the second attempt, he succeeded. Reika immediately felt more comfortable and thanked him for helping her. However, Suji insisted that she didn't need to thank him for something so simple. While helping, Suji accidentally noticed information written on part of her clothing. That reminded him of the strange conversation he had with his friend earlier. Without thinking, he muttered something out loud. Unfortunately, Reika overheard him. She froze for a moment before realizing what he had said. Immediately embarrassed, she demanded to know how he knew such information. Suji quickly tried to explain that he hadn't meant anything by it and that it had simply slipped out. Still upset, Reika grabbed a pillow and threw it at him while telling him to stay away. At that moment, Reika became more convinced than ever that her suspicions about Suji were correct. No matter how much Suji apologized, Reika refused to listen. Instead, she left the infirmary before he could properly explain himself. Soon Suji was left alone. He felt terrible about how everything had turned out. For once, he thought he had managed to help Reika, yet somehow the situation had become even worse. He couldn't understand why he always seemed to make things worse whenever he was around her. Meanwhile, Reika walked away with mixed emotions. She convinced herself that she needed to be even more careful around Suji in the future. In fact, she began wondering if Suji was somehow connected to the reason she had been feeling so strange lately. Unable to think of any other explanation, she became more certain of her misunderstanding. Unbeknownst to Reika, someone had been watching everything from a distance. That person was Hitomi Akasaki, a first-year student and fellow member of the drama club. From what she had seen, Akasaki completely misunderstood the situation and became suspicious of Suji. The following day, everyone had to act professionally despite the previous incident. After drawing lots, it was decided that Reika would serve as Suji's acting instructor for a Beauty and the Beast rehearsal. Reika explained the lesson seriously while Suji stood nervously nearby. Still remembering the previous day's events, Reika remained extremely cautious. Suji, on the other hand, still felt guilty. He tried to apologize again, but Reika deliberately looked away. She believed it would be safer not to show any weakness around him. Ironically, while Reika constantly worried about what Suji might do, it was actually her own imagination that kept creating these situations. Suji had no idea what was going through her mind. Reika simply convinced herself that Suji was like the beast from the story, and that she needed to avoid unnecessary contact with him. Just as the rehearsal was about to begin, Reika told Suji to prepare his script. Suddenly, someone hugged her from behind. It was Hitomi Akasaki. Reika had warned Akasaki many times not to be so clingy, but Akasaki always brushed it off by saying she was simply showing how much she admired Reika As one of the newer members of the club, Akasaki had a talent for attracting attention wherever she went. The moment she noticed Suji nearby, she immediately became protective of Reika. Looking suspiciously at him, she demanded to know what he was doing there. Suji calmly explained that Reika was assigned to be his acting instructor that day. Akasaki responded with a mischievous smile. She suggested that Reika could teach her instead. Suji immediately objected, pointing out that things didn't work that way. Akasaki already knew that. Even so, she argued that Suji was still an inexperienced actor and that it would be a waste of Reika's valuable time to focus on teaching him. Akasaki even asked Reika what she thought about the idea. However, Reika did not immediately agree. She replied that Suji would have to accept Akasaki's proposal first. Suji immediately refused, and Reika apologized to Akasaki for being unable to grant her request. Akasaki then walked over to Suji and showed him something on her phone. She suggested that what he saw might change his mind. Suji's eyes widened in surprise. He asked how Akasaki had gotten hold of it. Standing a short distance away, Reika became curious and asked what the two of them were talking about. Both of them quickly replied that it was nothing. Akasaki then asked Suji to come with her. Although reluctant, Suji followed. Watching their strange behavior, Reika couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. What exactly was on Akasaki's phone? And why were they hiding it from her? The image on Akasaki's phone was a photo taken in the infirmary the previous day. From the angle of the picture, the situation looked very suspicious and could easily be misunderstood. Reika was shocked when she realized what they were discussing. She also wondered why Akasaki had shown it to Suji. Curious about Akasaki's intentions, Reika secretly listened to their conversation. She overheard Akasaki saying that this was her last chance to convince Reika to spend more time with her. That revelation shocked Reika. Before long, she jumped to another conclusion and convinced herself that Akasaki might also be interested in her, just like she believed Suji was. Akasaki urged Suji to give in, saying this was her final opportunity. She insisted that the two of them were on equal footing and pushed him to give Reika an answer. Meanwhile, Reika remained completely confused. How could Akasaki be interested in her when they were both girls? A little later, Akasaki returned to Reika and suggested that while Suji thought things over, Reika could help her practice backstage. Reika was caught off guard by the suggestion. As Akasaki enthusiastically moved closer, Reika's imagination once again began running wild. She started overthinking every action and convinced herself that Akasaki's intentions were far more dramatic than they really were. In reality, Akasaki was simply her usual energetic self. Still, Reika couldn't help remembering how affectionate Akasaki often acted around her. Whenever Akasaki said she loved her, Reika had always assumed she meant it as a friend. Now she wasn't so sure. As Akasaki continued approaching, Reika kept stepping back. She assured Akasaki that they could still talk perfectly well from a distance. Eventually, Akasaki reluctantly respected her request. At that moment, Suji finally spoke up. He had made his decision. Suji suggested that Reika spend some time helping Akasaki with her performance. Akasaki immediately celebrated her victory. Meanwhile, Reika wondered why Suji had suddenly agreed. As Suji prepared to leave, Reika stopped him. She wanted to see his acting first. Akasaki was surprised by the request. Soon, Reika and Suji began practicing together. During the rehearsal, Reika quietly asked why Soji had stepped aside to help Akasaki. She guessed it might have something to do with the photo from the infirmary. Suji looked away before answering. He said that after everything that happened the day before, he didn't feel he had the right to insist on anything. Hearing that answer, Reika disagreed. She admitted that the incident had been embarrassing, but that was all. Then she added that Suji should take responsibility for his actions and continue improving himself. Suji was stunned by her response. Before he could reply, Akasaki suddenly stepped between them. She wasn't happy seeing the two of them talking so comfortably. Reika immediately told her to stop acting childish. Then it was Suji's turn to speak. He asked Reika what she thought about him and Akasaki. Once again, Reika's imagination exploded. Watching the two of them argue, she convinced herself that they were both competing for her attention. The idea embarrassed her so much that she could barely think straight. Unable to handle the situation she had imagined in her head, Reika decided to leave. Trying to deal with both of them at once felt impossible. As Reika walked away, Akasaki stared after her in confusion. She couldn't understand why Reika had suddenly left. Suji sighed and guessed that the situation had simply become overwhelming. He felt like he had somehow made another mistake. Akasaki immediately objected. She didn't appreciate being blamed for what happened. Then she turned to Suji and questioned him. Hadn't he said he was leaving earlier? So why was he still here? Akasaki warned that if the photo ever spread around the school, he could end up in serious trouble. Suji calmly replied that his main concern was protecting Reika's reputation. He didn't want the misunderstanding to hurt her. Akasaki shouted at him to stop trying to act cool. Suji honestly had no idea what she meant. Akasaki accused him of being unfair. In her eyes, Reika was always helping him, yet he never seemed to realize it. While they continued arguing, Reika secretly peeked at them from behind a nearby door. Her face was bright red. Whenever Suji was involved, she completely lost her composure. To everyone else, Reika was an admired and respected student. Many people felt lucky just to see her in person. Her beauty, talent, and accomplishments inspired those around her. People often wondered what someone as perfect as Reika was really like. None of them knew that behind her calm appearance was an imagination that never stopped running wild. That morning, Reika found herself thinking about Akasaki even more. She hadn't expected Akasaki to become another source of confusion in her life. As she walked through the school, her thoughts suddenly stopped when she heard Akasaki's voice. In the distance, she spotted Akasaki standing in front of Suji. Curious, Reika quietly watched. Suji was telling Akasaki to stop using the infirmary photo against him. Reika correctly guessed that they were discussing the picture. Unfortunately, her imagination quickly focused on something else. Instead of the photo itself, she became convinced that the two of them were arguing because of her. She never imagined that Akasaki would go to such lengths. Eventually, Akasaki gave in. She admitted that continuing the argument could end up hurting Reika, and that was never what she wanted. Because of that, Hitomi Akasaki finally decided that she would stop using the infirmary photo against Suji Tsugida. Suji was immediately relieved. Watching from a distance, Reika Tamamori also felt relieved. Suji was happy that Akasaki finally seemed to understand him, but Akasaki quickly denied it. In her eyes, Suji was still just as annoying as ever. She even said she wished he would quit the drama club already. Neither Suji nor Reika could understand Akasaki's way of thinking. Soon, Suji and Akasaki appeared on stage wearing their Beauty and the Beast costumes. Suji looked impressed by Akasaki's appearance. But before he could say anything, Akasaki loudly asked whether he thought Belle's dress looked too good for her. Suji immediately denied it. Instead, he honestly said that the dress looked great on Akasaki. The compliment caught Akasaki off guard, and she blushed slightly. As usual, she tried to hide her embarrassment with a tsundere response. Changing the subject, Akasaki asked if they were really going through with the rehearsal. Suji confirmed that they were. He took Akasaki's outstretched hand, and the two began practicing their dance together. Although Akasaki complained the entire time, they actually worked together surprisingly well. From a distance, Reika watched them and began to think that perhaps she had been overthinking everything. However, her thoughts changed again when she overheard Akasaki saying that if they didn't perform well, Reika wouldn't pay attention to them. Curious, Suji asked why Akasaki had agreed to practice with him in the first place. Akasaki answered sarcastically, "Why else would anyone want to help Suji?" Suji became annoyed. He thought they had finally started getting along, but Akasaki immediately rejected that idea. According to her, they could never be friends. Suji asked why. After all, they both admired the same person. Why couldn't they be friends? Akasaki let go of his hand and replied that they were not the same. Then she suddenly showed Suji a photo on her phone. It was a picture of an outfit she had designed, and she wanted to know what he thought of it. Suji was impressed. The design looked much different from what Akasaki normally wore. He complimented her work and said it looked very good. However, that wasn't what Akasaki wanted to know. She asked what Suji would think if Reika wore it. Suji was surprised. The outfit had been designed specifically for Reika. He was impressed by how much effort Akasaki had put into making something for her. Meanwhile, Reika, who overheard the conversation, felt secretly happy. Akasaki explained that she wanted other people's opinions because she wasn't sure whether Reika would like the outfit. Reika immediately began worrying about it. She wondered if Akasaki actually expected her to wear something like that in public. At the same time, she didn't want to reject a gift that Akasaki had worked so hard on. She worried that refusing might hurt Akasaki's feelings. Suji, however, saw things differently. He believed Reika would appreciate the thought behind the gift, no matter what the design looked like. Hearing his response caused Reika's imagination to run wild once again. She started creating strange scenarios in her head that had nothing to do with what Suji and Akasaki were actually talking about. In reality, both of them were simply discussing an outfit Akasaki had made for someone she admired. A little later, Suji asked why Akasaki cared so much about Reika. Akasaki replied that Reika had been the first person to encourage her and give her a chance to pursue clothing design. That was why Reika was so important to her. She then added that even though Suji often annoyed her, she still tolerated him for Reika's sake. However, despite everything, she still hadn't deleted the photo from the infirmary. To prove it, she showed the picture again. Suji immediately panicked and begged her to delete it. From a distance, the two looked like they were having a lively conversation. Reika watched silently. For some reason, she felt a strange uneasiness in her chest. She couldn't understand why seeing them together made her feel that way. Reika felt that she couldn't just stand there and watch any longer. Suddenly, she called out to both Suji Tsukita and Hitomi Akasaki. The two immediately turned around, surprised to see Reika standing there. Without saying much, Reika walked over, took Suji by the hand, and led him away. Both Suji and Akasaki were confused by her sudden actions. Suji asked what was wrong, but Reika only replied that she needed to talk to him somewhere private. Eventually, she brought him to the drama club room. Suji asked why they had come there, but Reika took a moment to calm herself before answering. Only then did she realize that she had grabbed Suji's hand without thinking. The unexpected action left her feeling flustered. Before she could explain herself, Suji called out to her, bringing her back to reality. Reika quickly composed herself. In her rush, however, she lost her footing and nearly tripped. Suji immediately tried to catch her before she fell. The sudden commotion caused a nearby shower to turn on by accident, leaving Reika soaked. Both of them were startled by the unexpected situation. Suji quickly apologized and explained that he had only been trying to help. Before they could leave, they heard Akasaki's voice outside, searching for Reika. Not wanting to create another misunderstanding, they stayed quiet. Unfortunately, Akasaki decided to wait nearby until Reika appeared. As a result, Suji and Reika were temporarily stuck where they were. The small space made the situation awkward for both of them. Seeing how troubled Suji looked, Reika apologized. She regretted dragging him there so suddenly, but there was something she genuinely wanted to discuss. Suji was surprised. He asked what was so important. After hesitating for a moment, Reika finally spoke. She wanted to know whether he enjoyed spending time with her or with Akasaki more. Suji was caught off guard by the question. Reika explained that she had been watching him and Akasaki together. From her perspective, the two seemed to have a lot of fun whenever they interacted. Suji looked confused. He couldn't understand why Reika would think that. Reika replied that he never seemed that relaxed when he was around her. She wanted an honest answer. She felt that she couldn't keep wondering about it forever. Hearing the seriousness in her voice made Suji nervous. After thinking carefully, he decided to answer honestly. He explained that Akasaki was his classmate and also his rival for major roles in the drama club. The two often argued and competed with each other, but because they were the same age, he found it easy to talk with her. Reika looked stunned by the answer. Of course, it made sense that he would feel comfortable around someone his own age. Even so, Suji wasn't finished. Although he enjoyed competing with Akasaki, Reika was the person he admired most. He had looked up to her for a long time. Just being around her made him happy, even when she wasn't actively teaching him. More than anything, his biggest goal was to someday perform beside her as the male lead. He hoped she would continue guiding him and helping him improve as an actor. As Reika listened, the uneasy feeling she had been carrying suddenly disappeared. Instead, she felt overwhelmed by a completely different emotion. She had never realized that Suji thought so highly of her. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. Meanwhile, Suji still had one more thing to say. He wanted Reika to stop comparing herself to Akasaki. In his eyes, Reika was an excellent instructor. Akasaki often helped him in her own way, but that didn't mean Reika's teaching was any less valuable. In fact, he appreciated how seriously she took acting. No matter how strict her lessons were, Suji was grateful for everything she had done to help him improve. Reika's imagination immediately went out of control again. When Suji said that she could be as strict with him as necessary, Reika completely misunderstood his meaning. In her mind, Suji was actually asking her to punish him and change her lessons to match some strange personal preference. Unable to handle the wild scenarios forming in her head, Reika suddenly ran away once again. There was no way she could give lessons like the ones she was imagining. Outside, Hitomi Akasaki had been waiting. She was shocked when Reika suddenly emerged from the shower room completely soaked, while Suji was still inside. Naturally, Akasaki demanded to know what the two of them had been doing in there. Looking somewhat disappointed, Suji replied that Reika apparently didn't think he was ready for her special lessons yet. Still, he wasn't discouraged. Suji was determined to keep improving his acting skills. Meanwhile, Reika became even more convinced that Suji was saying strange things on purpose. Even though he had only said that he wanted her guidance and hoped to act alongside her someday, Reika interpreted it very differently. Despite all her misunderstandings, however, her mood had improved greatly after hearing how much Suji admired her. Later that day, Reika was in Shibuya because she had made plans with someone. That person was Hitomi Akasaki. Akasaki was thrilled that Reika had agreed to spend the day with her. As usual, she constantly stayed close to Reika and showed her affection in her energetic way. Reika still believed that Akasaki might have romantic feelings for her. After all, Akasaki often competed with Suji for Reika's attention and had even invited her out alone. Since Reika wasn't the type to reject someone's affection, she accepted the invitation. Besides, spending a day with Akasaki sounded enjoyable. Akasaki complimented Reika's outfit, and the two began exploring the city together. Their main goal was shopping. For Reika, it was a completely new experience. She had never really gone shopping for clothes before. Most of the time, professional stylists chose her outfits for her. As a result, she didn't know much about fashion. Akasaki happily took the lead. She picked out several outfits and encouraged Reika to try them on. After changing, Reika finally stepped out wearing a casual outfit, similar to what many girls her age wore. Akasaki was amazed. No matter what Reika wore, she looked incredible. Excitedly, Akasaki handed her another outfit to try. To Reika's surprise, she found herself genuinely enjoying the experience. Akasaki continued praising every outfit she wore. Seeing how much fun Akasaki was having also made Reika happy. Eventually, Akasaki became so excited that she rushed ahead toward another store. In her enthusiasm, she forgot that Reika was still changing clothes. As she hurried away, a piece of paper slipped from her bag without her noticing. Reika picked it up and looked at it. To her surprise, it appeared to be a private note exchanged between Akasaki and Suji. The note contained advice that Suji had given her. While Reika was still inside the changing room reading it, Akasaki suddenly pulled back the curtain. Both girls were startled. Reika wasn't fully dressed yet. At the same moment, someone else happened to see the scene from nearby. Akasaki quickly explained that she had only opened the curtain because Reika had been unusually quiet. Then Reika noticed the person standing nearby. It was Soji. Everyone froze. Without thinking, Reika immediately closed the curtain again. Her imagination instantly began creating another misunderstanding. She convinced herself that Akasaki and Suji must have been working together all along. In reality, Akasaki was just as confused as she was. She had no idea why Suji was suddenly there, especially inside a women's clothing store. Suji quickly explained. He was shopping with his younger sister. After hearing that, Reika cautiously asked if that was really the reason he was there. Suji apologized first. He explained that he hadn't intended to see anything. He had simply recognized Reika and looked over without thinking. Seeing his sincere reaction, Reika finally relaxed. Once again, she realized she had been overthinking things. Suji then complimented the outfit she was wearing and told her that it looked great on her. Reika was visibly pleased by the compliment. Akasaki, however, didn't want to lose. She immediately tried to chase Suji away so that she could continue spending time alone with Reika. Before either of them could do anything, several people nearby suddenly recognized Reika. As a famous model and the daughter of the Tamamori family, she naturally attracted attention wherever she went. Soon, more and more people began noticing her presence. Reika's popularity was truly incredible. Within moments, several fans gathered around her. More and more people recognized her, and before long, Reika found herself surrounded by admirers. Suji wanted to help her escape the crowd, but Hitomi Akasaki reacted first. She grabbed Reika's hand and quickly led her away from the gathering. After running for a while, the two finally managed to get away. Once they had a chance to catch their breath, Akasaki apologized. She felt bad for suddenly pulling Reika away without asking first. Not only that, but she also worried that she had spent the entire day forcing her own fashion preferences onto Reika. She felt she should have been more considerate of how Reika felt. Reika listened quietly before shaking her head. She completely disagreed. Spending the day together, picking out clothes, discovering new styles, and having fun along the way had been an enjoyable experience. In fact, Reika had genuinely enjoyed herself. She was also happy because Suji had complimented her outfit earlier. Thanks to the day's events, Reika realized how fun shopping could be. She even admitted that she would be happy if Akasaki invited her shopping again sometime. Hearing that made Akasaki incredibly happy. The only regret Reika had was that she hadn't actually bought any clothes. Akasaki immediately suggested that she take the outfit she was holding. Reika gladly accepted and put it on right away. Akasaki couldn't hide how pleased she was seeing Reika wear something she had chosen. Reika then became curious about where the outfit had come from. Proudly, Akasaki revealed that she had made it herself. She was thrilled that Reika was wearing something she had created. although she admitted that she was slightly annoyed because Suji had given her some advice while she was making it. At that moment, Reika finally realized that the note she had found earlier contained Suji's suggestions for the outfit. Akasaki still seemed somewhat irritated when talking about him, but Reika smiled. She told Akasaki not to let that bother her. The outfit was wonderful, and she could see Akasaki's personality reflected in every part of its design. The compliment immediately made Akasaki blush. Reika had always supported her whenever she needed help. That was one of the reasons Akasaki respected her so much. For Reika, however, it was nothing special. She believed that any good senior should help others whenever they could. Akasaki was deeply moved by her words. As they continued talking, Reika remembered the Cinderella costume Akasaki had made before. The moment it was mentioned, Akasaki became awkward. She could never forget that costume. Not simply because she had made it, but because it was the reason she had joined the drama club in the first place. Seeing Reika wear one of her creations had inspired her to continue making more outfits for her. Even though that was the truth, she couldn't bring herself to say it out loud. Later, while Reika and Nakasaki were happily chatting in a cafe, Suji happened to walk past. He noticed them and paused for a moment. However, a call from his younger sister quickly brought his attention elsewhere, and he continued on his way. If you enjoy my videos, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps more than you think. And if you'd like to support me further, consider joining my Patreon. I'm not making much from the channel at the moment, so every bit of support truly means a lot. You'll get ad-free videos and shoutouts as a thank you for helping me keep this going. Now, back to the video. Another day, Reika participated in an academic exchange program at school. As a second-year student, she visited a classroom of first-year students and encouraged them to ask questions about anything they were struggling with. The program was designed to allow older students to help tutor younger ones. That day, Reika officially began her role as a tutor. The first-year students welcomed her enthusiastically. Among them was Suji Tsukida. Coincidentally, Reika was assigned to help Suji's group. To Reika, this seemed like the perfect opportunity. She wanted to show Suji that she wasn't only talented on stage, but also an excellent student. If things went well, he would admire her even more. Unfortunately, Reika became distracted by her own thoughts. She stood there silently until Suji politely pointed out that she probably should begin the lesson. Startled, Reika immediately returned to reality. She apologized to everyone and began the session. At the same time, she secretly told herself that she would prove just how capable she was. One by one, the students showed Reika the problems they were struggling with. She carefully reviewed their work and quickly noticed that they were using the wrong formulas. Since many of the students seemed to have trouble remembering them, Reika decided to teach an easier method. Step by step, she showed them how to solve the problems without relying entirely on memorized formulas. The students listened carefully to Reika's explanation, but they still seemed confused. Eventually, the two girls turned toward Suji Tsukida and asked him to explain it again. Reika was surprised. She wondered if her explanation had not been clear enough. More importantly, why did they specifically ask Suji? One of Suji's friends, Yajima, explained that Suji simply had the kind of personality that made people feel comfortable relying on him. Meanwhile, Suji looked at the two girls and came to his own conclusion. He believed that they were probably too nervous around Reika to fully understand her explanation. Of course, that was only Suji's guess. The girls never actually said that. In reality, Suji admired Reika so much that he couldn't imagine anyone having a problem with her teaching. Wanting to help, he encouraged the girls not to be embarrassed and suggested that they ask Reika to explain it one more time. He assured them that Reika would never get annoyed by having to explain something twice. Thanks to Suji's encouragement, the girls asked Reika for another explanation. Watching him, Reika was genuinely surprised. Even though he could have explained everything himself, he chose to support her instead. Feeling motivated, Reika carefully explained the problem again, using a different method. This time, the two girls finally understood. They successfully solved the question and happily thanked her. They also apologized for not understanding the first explanation. Reika simply smiled and told them it was fine. She then thanked Suji as well, because she felt that he had helped her. The two girls also thanked Suji for his assistance. Caught up in the warm atmosphere, Reika unconsciously patted the girls on their heads. The girls immediately froze in surprise. Realizing what she had done, Reika quickly apologized. At home, she often petted her dog without thinking, and the habit had slipped out by accident. However, the girls didn't mind at all. In fact, they happily asked her to continue. Reika ended up gently pampering her two juniors for a little while longer. Then Suji suddenly raised his hand and asked Reika to teach him as well. Not wanting to miss out, Yajima immediately did the same. Reika turned to Suji and asked what he needed help with. Suji answered enthusiastically. Math wasn't his strongest subject, and there was a section he genuinely didn't understand. Seeing how eager he looked, Reika became suspicious. For some reason, she convinced herself that Suji might be expecting a reward too. After all, she had just patted the girls on the head. The thought of doing the same thing to Suji made her strangely embarrassed. Meanwhile, Suji simply pointed to the part of the lesson that was confusing him. He honestly just wanted help understanding the problem. Unfortunately, Reika's imagination once again started running wild. Even the way Suji was sitting caused her to overthink the situation. Suji called out to her again when she remained silent. Snapping back to reality, Reika finally sat down beside him. Trying to stay composed, she told him that she couldn't give him any special reward, but she could certainly help him study. Suji had no idea what she was talking about. In the end, Reika taught him the problem step by step. After listening carefully, Suji solved it on his own. When he got the correct answer, he looked extremely happy. Without thinking, Reika reached out and patted him on the head. Suji looked surprised and was about to ask why. However, Reika quickly told him to stay quiet. She said that this reward would have to be enough for now. She also reminded him that they were still in a classroom full of people. Suji could only stare at her in confusion. Then he quietly thanked her. The simple thank you immediately made Reika blush. Unable to handle the embarrassment, she hurriedly stepped away for a moment. The remaining students were then told to continue solving problems on their own. After Reika left, Suji's classmates immediately started teasing him. Meanwhile, Reika couldn't stop thinking about the feeling of patting Suji's head. For some reason, the memory stayed in her mind. At the same time, Suji was still confused by what Reika had meant when she said, "This reward will have to do for now." The more he thought about it, the more distracted he became. As a result, he ended up making another mistake in the next problem. Yajima quickly noticed and pointed it out, making Suji even more confused.
Please!
Subscribe.
I need this! My mom is kind of homeless.